We are live now, ma'am.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are here to commemorate the centenary of iconic PEC alumnus, Dr. Satish Dhawan, concurrent to the centenary year of PEC. Dr. Satish Dhawan was an Indian mathematician, an aerospace engineer, and one of India's most well-known scientists and institution builders who graduated from Punjab College of Engineering and Technology, Lahore, which is presently PEC. It is a matter of great pleasure and honor to have with us daughter of Dr. Satish Dhawan, Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan, as our dear speaker for the evening. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to Director of PEC, Dr. Dheeraj Sanghi, former Vice Chancellor, Punjab University, Dr. Arun Grover, who's the Honorary Professor at PEC, and everyone who has joined us today to be the part of the 13th lecture in the ongoing PEC Centenary Lecture Series. The host of the event will be our own alumna, Pamela Kumar, who is graduate of PEC and graduated from the year 1983 and later went to Rajah's University in Bangalore. She currently is Director General of Telecom Standards Development Society of India and brings with her an experience of 35 plus years in communication, computers, and semiconductor industry. Without further ado, I would like to hand over the screen to Pamela Kumar, who will formally introduce you to Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan.
Thanks, Divya, and welcome to all of you. It's really indeed a huge, great honor for me to be here, on this very momentous occasion of the centenary of the Punjab Engineering College and the inauguration of the Satish Dhawan Memorial Lecture. So, just to kick this off, let me, complement the video with some statements here. Dr. Satish Dhawan was an Indian mathematician and aerospace engineer who graduated from Punjab College of Engineering and Technology, Lahore, which then became the PEC. He is widely regarded as the father of experimental fluid dynamics research in India. Dr. Dhawan was one of the most eminent researchers in the field of turbulence and boundary layers. He served as the first chairman of the Indian Space Commission. He was the longest running director of the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and had served as the chairman of ISRO in 1972, since 1972. For his meritorious and pioneering contributions in the field of science and technology, he was awarded the Padma Vibhushan, the nation's second highest civilian honor. It's really a very special occasion here that his daughter, Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan, who herself is a very eminent researcher in the field of cell biology, is here with us to give us these very special insights of Dr. Satish Dhawan and you know, the great person that he was, and his you know, from the eyes of a daughter, it will be a very, very special insight for us. So we're really looking forward to this, and I would just you know, spend a few seconds introducing Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan, who is here amongst us. So she has been a scientist contributing in the field of adult stem cell function and skeletal muscle generation. Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan is a cell and development biologist working as an emeritus scientist at the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology and an elected fellow of the Indian National Academy. Dr. Dhawan is also visiting professor at Institute for Stem Cell Science and Regenerative Medicine. She completed her postgraduate in botany from Delhi University in 1983, same batch as me. I also completed my bachelor's in 83, and attained the doctoral degree from Boston University in 1991. Dr. Dhawan is the current president of the Indian Society of Cell Biology and the Indian Society of Developmental Biologists from 2017 to 2020. Dr. Dhawan has been active advocate for establishing India as a leader in biomedical research. So with that, I hand it over to Dr. Jyotsna Dhawan, and we are looking very, you know, we're excitedly looking forward to her talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Just one small interruption here. I request all of you to put your questions in the chat window of the streaming video, and we will then have a Q&A session after her talk and make it interactive. Thank you, Jyotsna. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Pamela Kumar, for that gracious introduction, and to the students for assembling that nice jazzy video sketch. Good evening again. I am so delighted to be here. I thank Professor Arun Grover, Dr. Dheeraj Sangvi, and the other organizers of this wonderful event. It's been very efficiently organized, and I'm really so pleased to be here. Thank you to Punjab Engineering College for organizing this series of lectures, and in remembering my father on his birth centenary, and giving me the honor of representing his family at the first talk. I'm going to take a minute to share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I chose to title my talk today, Satish Dhawan, Chance and Friendship in the Arc of a Life. And I just want to say a word to the young people who may be watching that my father always signed his letters in his first name. So when we children were old enough to leave home, we started calling him Satish. In fact, even his grandchildren called him by his name, which may seem a little strange in our culture where elders are always referred to by an honorific. But my father believed that respect did not lie in such things, but in one's actions. So I will refer to him as Satish, just as we did during his life. Satish's work and actions contributed to a variety of individuals and institutions. But I will talk today of the people who deeply influenced him, and without whom I think his life would have been immeasurably different. This is just a picture of him when he retired. Satish was fortunate to be born to a progressive middle-class family. His father, Devidyal, shown here with his uncle Purushottam Lal in Dera Ismail Khan around the turn of the last century. So his father and family hailed from Dera Ismail Khan in pre-independence Punjab, and he trained for the bar in Lahore. And as a judge, he was shown here in his Lahore office. Satish's father was posted all over undivided Punjab, and after partition was involved in attempting the rehabilitation of the millions who were displaced. Satish's mother, Lakshmi Khosla, came from a Srinagar family, and her father had been the chief medical officer in Kashmir, and he had been valued very much for his service during the serial plague outbreaks of 1905 to 1908. Which sort of harkens back now to what's happening with us in the middle of the pandemic. So here are simply all the places where Satish lived during his early life, because his father was posted to all of these different places. Satish and his siblings were very close. These are all pictures of them from around 1949 to 1950. His older sister, Vimla, was a talented artist, and his younger sisters, Primla and Shukla, were educators. And his youngest brother, Ranjit, about whom I'll talk a little bit more later, was a fighter pilot in the IAF. Satish Dhawan was very much influenced by his relationship with his sister Primla Dhawan Lumba and her husband Satish Lumba, who was a trade union leader who tragically died in an air crash in 1970, but with whom they shared many, many values. Shown here is Primla Lumba, who lived to the grand age of 94. And she, in addition to being a teacher, Primla was a committed activist for women's rights and social justice. And she and her husband were among my father's closest family relationships. And Pimi lived to this wonderful age of 94, inspiring generations of students, activists, scholars, and ordinary citizens to never stop fighting the good fight. The Lahore and Srinagar of Satish's youth were very comfortable places for the young man who seemed to have boundless enthusiasm and motivation set against the backdrop of colonial rule, partition, and the powerful, mesmerizing figures of Gandhi and Nehru. Many before me have commented on the unusual list of degrees that my father accumulated. And I have often wondered if they actually represented Satish's search for the right profession. I think that in studying engineering, he finally hit his stride, finding the thing that made him happy. I'm showing you here Satish's BA and MA certificate, and I want to point out to you that both were achieved in the second class. And I'm showing this to you because I think it's worth thinking about whether a person with these qualifications would have been permitted to progress today. Have we become too focused on scholastic ability and not on courses that really develop understanding and ability? This is just a letter of recommendation from his institute head at the time that he passed his BSc in engineering and won the McLagan Gold Medal. And I believe you still have that gold medal going at the Punjab Engineering College. After, and in his, at the later part of his engineering, he spent 2 years doing practical training at the Hindustan Aircraft Company, which is now, of course, HAL. And the period of working with his hands, I think, dramatically changed his view of what he wanted to do with his life. So even before independence, some far-sighted individuals in government formulated a program for educating young Indians in the best centers for technical and scientific education in the UK and USA. What's shown here is a group of these Government of India scholarship students. Here's Satish, here's his good friend Inder Kapila, who was also from Punjab Engineering College and who went on to participate in the building of the Bhakra Dam. So what I want to point out, especially to my young viewers, is that this group of aspiring young people don't know now what they will become or what they are looking forward to as the adventure that lies ahead. Satish was away at Caltech during partition. The Dhawan family was fortunate to survive intact in the tragic upheaval that tore our country apart. But his whole family was fine, and they made it. At Caltech, Satish really hit his stride. He got involved in his work in a manner that allowed him to really explore his talents. And much of this was because of the group that he found himself in. And shown here are two of his closest friends and his mentors at Caltech, Hans Liepmann, his professor, and Anatol Roshko, his co-student. And so Hans Liepmann was an immigrant also to the US, had come from pre-war Germany, and had spent some time in Istanbul and then landed up in California. Anatol Roshko was from the Ukraine and had grown up in Canada and then come to Caltech. And these three immigrants formed a very close bond, and they were friends and collaborators for life. And shown here in this picture of Satish and Anatol Roshko in Bangalore sometime in the 80s is also Rodam Narasimha, who was Satish's first student, but also became a part of that very close-knit group. Professor Narasimha passed away. Professor Narasimha, Rodam also went to Caltech and worked with Anatol and Hans Liepmann, shown here. So what I'm showing you here is a screen grab from the Caltech Department of Aerospace. And what is shown is a short list of legends of GALSIT. And I'm showing you here up in the left corner a picture of Satish in 1948 when he first came to Pasadena. And shown is also Inder Kapila. So I don't think that at this stage in 1948, Satish ever imagined that his picture would be displayed on the website of GALSIT as one of its legends. So this is a recurring theme in my talk. I want young people to realize that you don't know what you will do today while you're still aspiring and looking for what it is that will make your, that will allow you to contribute. But focusing on what it is that you are doing, I think the most important thing is to find the thing that gives you joy and which will be the huge motivation in your wanting to put everything you have into it. I want to show you a few pictures of Rodam Narasimha, who passed away this last December, in remembrance of this remarkable man. You know, Rodam Narasimha was Satish's first student. And I don't think he ever imagined that he would be remembered as this polymath who gave us such a wide variety of scientific programs, ranging from cloud dynamics to indigenous commercial aircraft, from the study of Indian systems of knowledge to being considered one of the foremost mentors of his generation. Returning from Caltech, Satish came back to India in 1951 to join the IISc. He had heard about the IISc while he was at HAL as doing his practical training. And so he was, I think, very enamored of the possibility that he might be able to work there. And he was lucky enough to be able to be selected for a position there. So the Department of Aeronautics today, of course, is one of the most popular departments at the IISc, with projects ranging from very high-end aerospace research to drones that have a variety of practical and scientific applications. It's a buzzing place. And here's a picture of Satish looking rather stern in his office in the early days at IISc. But one of the things that Satish did when he threw himself into his work was to interact very closely with people in the aeronautics department workshop, many of whom he trained himself. And I'm showing you the names of 3 of these who were very important in his life: Mr. B. Ramaya, Mr. J. Doss, and Mr. B. Narona. And shown here are a couple of pictures of Mr. Ramaya at his workshop. The reason why I point this out is that this was a theme with him all his life. He loved to work with his hands and to build things in a precise and purpose-built fashion so that it was appropriate to the application. An early activity that grew out of Satish's commitment to egalitarian values was his participation in the World Federation of Scientific Workers. Shown here is the 1956 meeting of the World Federation of Scientific Workers, who was presided over by Frederick Joliot-Curie. And here's a picture of Satish meeting Premier Chou En-lai. Just as fortunate as he was in his birth family, Satish was also lucky in love. He met my mother right outside the aeronautics department in 1955. My mother had been Nalini Nirodi, was a Bangalore girl. She had gone to the US to study. She was a PhD in cytogenetics, and they married in Simla in 1956. IISc was so much more than a workplace for Satish. It was the place that gave him the greatest inspiration to work on practical issues. Here's a picture of him in 1959 with Pandit Nehru. For us, of course, IISc campus was a paradise. You cannot imagine growing up on that wild campus as it was then. It's so much more built up now. But at the time, it was in the 60s, it was just a fantastic place for children to run around completely safe. Here's a picture of Satish from 1965. This is a group of friends whom he met almost as soon as he arrived at IISc in 1951. I think of them as practical idealists. Each one of them worked hard in their chosen area, but never forgot the value of focusing that endeavor towards benefiting a larger cause, be it education, appropriate technology, egalitarian ideals, technology for rural development. In particular, Satish's closest friends were Professor A.R. Vasudevamurthy, who was responsible for developing indigenous silicon technology, Professor A.K.N. Reddy, who was one of the pioneers of appropriate technology at IISc, and Professor Sethu Rao, who was an educator par excellence. Here are some more pictures of these lifelong friends. Satish loved making things with his hands. He loved to fly paper planes, and this is a picture of him at his retirement from IISc. He quickly made a paper plane and flew it. And we captured that on the cover of the Remembrance volume of Current Science. So I want to talk a little bit about aeronautics and the thread that ran through his life in both theory and practice of flight. What you will see is that there is a continuum which moves all the way from aeronautical engineers to aircraft designers. Here's a picture of Raj Mahindra, the aircraft designer extraordinaire at HAL, and a fellow colleague from Caltech who was the director at NAL, SR Valluri, and Group Captain Suranjan Das, who gave his life testing the HF-24, which was the first Asian fighter to be ever built. And this is Satish's brother, Wing Commander Jyotsna Dhawan, who flew in both the 65 and 71 wars and was in charge of a squadron of Marut HF-24 supersonic fighters, shown here. Although life was busy in those early IISc's years, Satish's appointment to ISRO changed many things, since it catapulted him into a whirlwind of activity and expectations at the national level, set on the back of India's aspirations in space. Vikram Sarabhai's leadership had created a community of scientists and engineers. Shown here are some of these people whose continuing service at ISRO paved the way for its early success. I'm showing you Brahm Prakash, another Punjab graduate, Professor U.R. Rao, and those young engineers at the time, now retired, Arvamudam, Rajan, Bhavsar, all people who contributed everything they had to the success of ISRO. The culture of ISRO incorporates a steady and detailed analysis of all failures. I think it's very important to realize that you cannot have serial successes unless you learn from the hard work and failure and acknowledge that deep learning that comes from loss. I'm showing you here a snapshot of Satish's notes for a lecture to the Indian Academy on the space program back in 1979. And you will see that it's focused on indigenous development and peaceful uses of space. One of the things that I think caught the eye of the nation at the time was how appropriate technology was used to transport the Apple satellite through electromagnetic testing. When you needed a non-metallic structure, a bullock cart was used. Here's ISRO in action in 1983. Satish with Dr. Gavarikar at the control centers and Sriharikota. And here's ISRO in action today. Today, of course, there's a new generation at ISRO, and it's a great pleasure for me to note that both the project director and the mission director for Chandrayaan-2 were women, very accomplished women. Something that's very important to point out is that ISRO works consistently, reliably, and directly in the public eye in real time. And this reflects the tireless work of everyone who conceptualizes programs, scientists, technicians, canteen workers, drivers, security, people who keep the clean rooms clean. I think it's very important to realize that every piece of work in the context of a collective is very important. This is the kind of culture that comes from a focus on impactful application. So not many of us have to do the kind of work that ISRO does, which is to perform an incredibly difficult task, delivering while under constant public scrutiny in real time. Just a hand-drawn graph of Satish's looking at Earth observation missions, where he plotted spacecraft weight over the time that it would take to achieve those. I want to touch a little bit on matters of conscience, which occupied Satish quite a bit. I've spoken to you a little bit about the International Union of Scientific Workers, but Satish was also involved in Pugwash, which is an international community of people dedicated to the peaceful uses of technology. As a professional, he was also willing to stake his reputation on ensuring that Mr. Nambinarayanan from ISRO, who was falsely accused, was had some support. And as a citizen, he signed the Narmada petition, perhaps because the idea of displacement was something very real to him, having gone through partition as his family did. Shown here is simply a depiction of the pugwash, where both Sarabhai and Satish were very active, and a picture here of Nambinarayanan and just a screenshot of the Current Science signature campaign that Satish led to support Nambinarayanan. It's remarkable that, in fact, it was only last year, late last year, that after a quarter century of his fight for justice, that Mr. Nambinarayanan received complete compensation for this false accusation. I want to move on to a story of four friends in this post-independence era of 1951 to 1971. And we will call them by their first names, but you will know them as MGK Menon, Shivaraj Ramaseshan, Satish, of course, and Radhakrishnan. So I'm returning to my theme of the fact that when you are in the midst of working life, you have no time to realize that you may contribute in ways that you cannot imagine, or even in ways that you have not any intention of doing. So three of the friends had very standard paths, okay? Goku was educated at Madras, then at Bristol, and worked doing wonderful things at TIFR. Here's a picture of him, MGK Menon, as a young man winning a wrestling shield in college. But here he is as the director of TIFR with Mrs. Gandhi. And he was known as a person who was counted on to lead many, many national programs, and stepped in many times when there was a need for someone to tide over times of difficulty, as he did when Vikram Sarabhai passed away suddenly and there was a vacuum at ISRO. I'm showing you here a picture of Shivaraj Ramaseshan in the early years doing experimental physics in the 1940s at IISc. And here he is talking excitedly about the capacity for building new materials. He served as a president of the Indian Academy of Sciences, and he was the editor of Current Science for many years. I doubt very much that Goku, who planned the neutrino experiment in the KGF mine shafts, ever imagined that he would be called upon to lead so many institutes of national importance, and that he would be remembered as the quintessence of sagacity and visionary leadership. I doubt that the young Shivraj, who waited at a college function in Wardha so that he could go close enough to the Mahatma to physically touch him as a talisman, I doubt he would ever have imagined that he would be remembered not only for being a distinguished physicist, but also for bringing enormous personal influence on ensuring rigorous scientific publishing in India. I'm very sure that the young Radhakrishnan, Rad, who built and sailed this boat, the Cygnus, from Ipswich to Sydney with just two other people on board, a journey of thousands of miles, I doubt very much that he ever imagined that he would return to India to head the Raman Institute and be remembered as the creator of a unique institutional model. And I've already told you that I very much doubt that the young Satish, who worked on the shop floor at HAL, would imagine that he would one day be called upon to lead ISRO, and that we would have a center named after him in this vibrant indigenous civilian space program. So The question that came to me when I was reflecting on my father's life this past year, which has been his centenary, was, were there great visionaries and doers only in the era just post-independence? I don't think so. Because if there's one thing that I've realized after meditating on my father's life, it is this. It often seemed to me that the generation who built independent India was more committed and focused than my own, or that the current generation. But this is something of an illusion, since every generation is likely to value the inheritance of problems which were seemingly solved by the previous generation, and to devalue the struggle of people around them, including themselves, because these struggles are still in progress. We don't know the end of these stories that we see developing around us. Today, I would say the task is as difficult, if not more so, than the struggle and the emergence of independent India, since those with whom we must disagree and take issue with are not a foreign colonizing power, but ourselves. A colonial government has no moral authority, only aggressive strength. And in the end, they recognize this and leave. But what of our own ability to ensure dissent and open discussion in our society so that we accommodate divergent views and make it possible for all members of our society to progress, not one set at the cost of others? So I really do believe that in each generation, there will be those who have the courage of their convictions and will prefer an engaged life rather than a comfortable one. And they will show independence in thought and action, and in doing so will create and lead and inspire. Satish had a peaceful retirement with grandchildren. In his last research, he wrote a book on bird flight, claiming no originality, but using the published literature and also the proximity to migratory birds and the high-speed cameras at ISRO, because he made frequent visits to Lake Pulicat near Sriharikota. In this little book that grew out of his work, he thanked the ISRO scientists for their help, but he also thanked the birds for their participation. This book has been reprinted by the Indian Academy of Sciences, updated by Professor Jayant Arekeri and his student, Deependra Gupta, and I'm very grateful to them for that. Satish passed away in 2002. In his life, he studied elements of flight and left a legacy that went beyond aeronautical research and space applications. Satish belonged to a generation that left a legacy of science and engineering in the service of humanity, but also a wider legacy of egalitarian thinking and the courage of their convictions. We too can look beyond narrow ideals to the universal. I am a cell biologist. Living cells, shown here in the picture on the right, on the left is a picture of a muscle cell, which is what I study. Living cells are individual units which can be perfectly self-contained, but in order to make sure that the whole organism survives, they must participate as a collective. To perform any task worth the while, a collective effort is needed, and sometimes tasks are not in agreement and they require negotiation. Shown here is a picture of the ISRO MOM image of Mars, also, to me, symbolizing a collective effort of many, many hundreds of individuals. From space, our home is a beautiful place, even if it is not always so on the ground for many of our brothers and sisters. So I want to end with a universal image of human achievement, which is possible only by invoking the collective. Something that reminds us that we are not just individuals or men and women or Indians, but human. This picture was one of Satish's favorite pictures. It is called the pale blue dot. It was a picture taken by Voyager in 1990 when this wonderful little spacecraft, engineered by NASA JPL, was leaving the solar system 13 years after it was launched. The great Carl Sagan persuaded the control group to ask Voyager, which had until then been sending us pictures of the universe ahead. Carl Sagan asked them to turn around and take a picture of our home. The backward glance of the iconic pale blue dot image shows us simultaneously our infinitesimally small place in the universe and the fact that our species is singular in being able to conjure the means to take that unimaginable journey and look back at ourselves. This quote, taken from the Reverend Sockman, encapsulates that universal joy of exploring our universe. The larger the island of knowledge, the longer the shoreline of wonder. It is amazing to me that Voyager is still sending back data 42 years after it was sent out to explore the universe. We too have a universe of possibility before us. Thank you all for participating in this remembrance of my dear father and giving me the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, thanks, Jyotsna. That was a wonderful talk, and it took us through so much of history, and through the life of Satish Dhawan, we have seen so many aspects of the nation, how it has evolved, and your personal linkage between biology and science, and so many different aspects. It was a really wonderful and enlightening talk. Thank you so much. And we have some very interesting questions. So given that you kept it focused on his professional life, there's a lot of curiosity about his personal life. Okay, so you get ready for that.
Okay.
So I think the first one says, can you please share Mr. Dhawan's, Dr. Dhawan's ideology for life?
I think his ideology was a simple one. Treat people as equals, be direct, don't expect adulation, do your job, do your work, and also, I mean, the way I've described him, sometimes he comes across as, maybe very serious, but he was not. At home, he was a fun-loving guy. So we had lots of laughter. He didn't take, it's not that he didn't take his work and life seriously. He took it very seriously. He took his work extremely seriously, but he also let things sit lightly on his shoulders. So he did not take himself seriously, in the sense that he did not expect that others should, give him a particular type of respect, or so he dealt with people directly.
So along the same lines, the other question is, Dr. Dhawan has been so passionately involved in leading ISRO and ISC. Did he get time for his family? And also, did your mother was your mother able to pursue her ambitions, or did she have to compromise them?
Yeah, so I'll take them in order. The first one was, did he have time for family? He did, especially in the early years. I have many wonderful memories. I mean, he even used to give us haircuts. And I remember, because IISc in those days was far from everything, right? It was a big yatra to go into Bangalore to get anything done. So he would cut our hair, and I remember him parting my hair by hair, until it was a Euclideanly straight geometric line. So he spent a lot of time with us, especially in the early years. He used to take us on picnics, and he used to spend a lot of time going for walks around the institute. In 1972, things changed somewhat, because he became so busy with both IISc and ISRO. But he still made sure that when he was in town and not traveling, that we all sat down to dinner together, and we conversed about what had happened during the day. Now, with regards to my mother's own career, actually, no, she did not manage to continue her career. And this is something which, to the end of her life, she claimed that she didn't want to continue. But I know she did. And I very much think about the fact that, circumstances did not make it easy for a woman in her position, even though she too was a gutsy woman. She had grown up in Bangalore. She had struck out on her own. She made sure she, refused to get married until she was, had done her studies. And, in 1952, there were hardly any Indian women who were going to the United States for a PhD. So she was quite a pioneer in her own ways, and in a way set a path for her sisters, who also, every one of them went to the United States to study and came back. She chose her own husband, which was a good thing. And but once she got married and the children came along, it was difficult for her to continue. So she did have a postdoctoral position, but she wasn't able to keep going. So I think that was a regret. Although I will say, one of the reasons why I am a biologist, and one of the reasons why my sister is an artist and my brother is an astronomer, is also to do with my mother. Not just that we were trying to emulate my father. It's, in fact, my mother spent a lot of time with us, inspiring us to explore biology and the world around us, and made sure that there were books and things to discuss and look at. She borrowed a microscope so that we could look at things under the microscope. So that was a whole new world.
So you've already alluded to this, but the next question is about the influence that your parents have had on all of you children, and how it has played a role for you in your choices and your life today, right?
Yeah.
How your lives have turned out.
Yeah. So I would say that they were actually very open with us. They never made a choice for us. They expected us to make our own decisions about what it was that we were going to do. Of course, they expected us to work hard at whatever it was that we were going to do. I remember one summer when I was about 13 and I was slouching around, not doing much of anything. And my mother got annoyed with me and she said, why don't you go start a rock band? Go do something. So basically, she wanted both of them. They were not prescriptive. We were free to choose our path, but they expected us to work at it, whatever it was.
So then there's a question of Dr. Dhawan had many degrees and was lucky to be able to choose his path. Yes. Somehow I think I'm interpreting that he had the privilege that he could go take a degree after degree. He didn't have
Certainly.
the pressure to take the first job, right?
Absolutely.
And few of us get the opportunity and have that kind of support from our families.
Completely.
What is your message to the society and institutions of today?
Well, I would say, if one has the monetary ability to be able to be lucky enough not to have to go into a job right after school, or as many people do, or after a first degree where they find themselves having to earn a living, it is very important, I think, for parents to let children make a choice. Now, this is not to say that they should not be there to assist them with making that choice if necessary. But I think imposing a choice on a child or a young person is a wrong thing, because the greatest motivation for doing something well is when you love it, right? And loving something and having a passion to do something can only come when you yourself internally wish to do that. So, so I do believe that parents need to step back a little bit and explore, or let their children explore what it is that they are good at. Sometimes it may not be evident.
So why don't you share with us a little more about living on the campus and being part of a family of scientists, or having scientists, your scientist friends of your father with you?
Yes.
How that may have, what that experience was like. Was it stifling at times? I mean, or was it only, I'm sure there were the good and the bad sides. So
yeah. I'm
both
trying hard to remember the bad. I don't. I mean, I tell you, it was a paradise, because not only was IISc physically beautiful and gorgeous and free, kids were free to roam around. Our home life also, life was simpler in some ways in those days. There wasn't, there was no television, there was no entertainment of any kind. Entertainment was basically people coming over and everybody sitting around in one big group. And what I actually miss is these intergenerational groups of people who would all sit around and in one huge circle. And the dads might be talking about science, but they didn't, or politics, or the latest novel. But the kids were not expected to run off and play somewhere else. We all participated if we wished, or not, or just sat there. Maybe some of the other kids got bored, but I was fascinated by all of these people. So I used to listen to them endlessly.
So I have a few challenging questions here for you. Okay. Sure. So one is, did he ever share with you about his days at PEC? So given that he did his BA and MA and all that, and then he moved into engineering. So how did PEC influence his life, or are there any snippets about his life at PEC that you can share?
Not much. I do know that he cycled to college, and he had good friends. One of whom was, I think, Inder Kapila was also a PEC graduate. I'm not 100% sure, but I think he was. So most of the stories of that time were really focused more on the kind of pre-independence kind of issues, and there was so much going on in our country at the time that those really dominated our, when we would sort of bug him to tell us stories of when he was young. And then he spent 2 very formative years in Bangalore at the time that he was in PEC, because he was there for this practical training. And that's when he was at HAL. And I think that kind of cemented his, he loved Bangalore. It was a very cosmopolitan city. In many ways, not as sophisticated as Lahore. Bangalore in those days was sleepier. So yes, there were, but I can't, you're right, it's challenging to me because I don't have specific points about PEC that I can bring out.
So then, what are the most memorable or beautiful moments that you spent with your father that could you share with us?
So some of the most special moments I shared with him, that all of us kids shared with him, were when we were very little. He used to organize painting sessions for us every Sunday, the whole family. He would make a big sort of drama of setting up 5 little tables with pens and pencils and paints for everybody. And in those days, the Air India calendars were the only pieces of paper large enough with a nice white at the back, So you got the last year's Air India calendar, you tore it off and you put it down for your drawing material. And this last summer, when I was going through my mother's sort of stored things, which we always used to tease her, Ma, why are you keeping all this stuff? It's such junk. I was so grateful to her that she had kept all of that, because all of our paintings, and especially all of his paintings, are there. And in fact, the cover of the Current Science article, which I shared with you on one of the things where he's throwing the, we have him in the foreground. the tree at the back was drawn by him. So, and when he would paint, he would not tell you what to do. He would sit down and start his work. And we were all, wanting to do what he was wanting to do. So we would all try and copy. And he'd say, no, go off and do whatever it is, do your own imagination. So there are many pictures which my brother drew at the time, which I was delighted to find. So, those were very special things because they allow a child to explore in an exciting way, but yet, so you're with everybody, but yet you're doing your own thing. So,
okay. So
I'll share with you another very special moment from later on in life when I was doing my master's in Delhi. I was just about to take my first year exams, and I had something of a crisis. It wasn't the work per se, but I was not convinced that I had taken the right course, that I was doing the right thing. And I said, what's the point of doing this exam? I really don't want to do it. And he happened to be visiting Delhi for a meeting, and he took an extra day and he stayed and he took me out and we went for a long walk in Lodi Gardens and we talked about this. And he said, look, don't do the second year if you feel that it's not of any use, but don't remove your options of staying in this by dropping out at this point. So just do your exams, however you fare, it doesn't matter. And then we'll talk about it again after this. And strangely enough, I did my exams, and then I thought, I might as well finish. And it was that very soon after that I discovered the joy of molecular biology. And that's what I got into.
That's very, very, very nice story that you've shared with us. Very inspiring. So then, there is a question about any frustrations or hard times that he faced and how did he overcome them? Do you have any such memories or any such?
Yeah, I think especially, I think while he was in his working life, there must have been frustrations and, a mile a minute, things will keep torpedoing a person in that position, right? Because you have to deal with so many different types of, not just committees, but expectations, etc. But his way of dealing with things was to talk about it with his close friends, Shivraj Ramaseshan, Amulya Reddy. They spent a lot of time talking about issues. And I think his way of dealing with things was to not let frustration become personal. He tried to look at issues for what they were and take himself out of the equation. And I think this helped him a lot. So I'm sure there were lots of frustrations that I may not have been aware of, but.
Okay. So now I have this, what the students are sending here is a set of rapid fire questions for you.
Okay. Boy, these guys really keep us on our toes.
I know, I'm amazed. So here's the rapid fire. Let me start. His favorite food.
Favorite food? It was definitely not sarson ka saag. So
okay.
He was a South Indian when it came to food. Tair shadam.
Huh?
Tair sadam.
Tair shadam, which is dahi and rice.
Oh, dahi and rice. Oh.
Yeah. He was not a typical Punjabi when it came to food.
No jalebi or gulab jamun, I was thinking.
No. Actually, banana splits. He used to make very good banana splits himself.
Okay, favorite books?
Oh, but for sure. He had many serious books that he loved, but there was the writing. I've written about it in one of the articles that I wrote for Bhavna. A little known author now, H.H. Munro, who was a very fierce critic of the English class system and wrote a bunch of very short stories which were incisive in being able to pull away the sort of pretense of the class system. So Those were his favorites. We still read them. We read them aloud. We used to read them aloud to each other all the time.
Favorite place?
Bangalore.
Bangalore. Favorite person?
Oh, my mother, for sure.
His hobby? I think you've already alluded to his hobby.
Yeah. He used to paint. He used to make things with his hands. He used to love carpentry. He made a lot of our furniture in the early days. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And then his favorite subject?
Talking, I think. He loved to talk. We used to sometimes, we used to tease him a lot about this.
And any favorite cuisine?
He liked the South Indian food. It suited him very well. But he loved hamburgers.
Ah,
Yeah, from his California days.
right, right. And his role model?
Oh, I think people who grew up in that era were completely in awe of Nehru and Gandhi, and you could not ask for greater role models than those.
So thanks a lot. It was a pleasure, hearing all these special insights. And
Thank you all for indulging me in all this.
No, and the way you structured the talk was really, really nice. I really thoroughly, so insightful and so sort of opening up your mind in different ways. It was beautiful. So
thank you.
Then I think Dr. Arun Grover, Professor Arun Grover will like to add his perspectives here.
So thank you, Jyotsna. You made my day. I love hosting events, talks, etc. And of the many, many events that I have hosted over since the Baba's birth centenary 2009, yours has been one of the most enjoyable. So let me just also add that the centenary of PEC overlaps with not only the centenary of Satish, but it also overlaps with the centenary of another person who left along with your father in the year 1945 on the same A.V. Hill inspired Government of India Fellowship, and that is Hargobind Khurana.
Yes.
So Khurana's centenary is on birth centenary is 9th of January 2022, and I would like to propose to Professor Dheeraj Sanghi to invite a very eminent student from IIT Kanpur, a computer scientist who is currently at MIT. That was the last place of Hargobind Khurana, and that is Mrigank Sur, who is a professor of Newton Professor of Neurosciences, and also currently the chair of the jury on Infosys Prize on Life Sciences. So I think the PEC centenary must host a lecture by Mrigank Sur, commemorating the centenary of Hargobind Khurana as a part of this lecture series. And I'm also very encouraged and delighted at your lecture, because only recently we commenced a series in Chandigarh, which is Science in the Family. So we had a first talk which we hosted from Srinivas Krishnagopal, son of Dr. P.K. Iyengar. Okay, and you have given us virtually a second talk in that series, and I have already jotted down the next in this thing. Jayant Udgaonkar is going to be the third one, son of Professor B.M. Udgaonkar. Then it is Imran, son of Abed Siddiqui. Then it is Maithili Narasimha, daughter of Rodham Narasimha. Then I have Shobhana Narasimhan, daughter of Professor Mathematician Professor M.S. Narasimhan. Then Uma Ramakrishnan, daughter of TVR, and Madan Rao, son of U.R. Rao. These are, I have known all of them personally, and I'm hoping to have this series run through once in a month on a Chandigarh platform. So I can add more and more, but let me conclude here. And thank you once again to you, as well as to Professor Dheeraj Sanghi, who promptly accepted my suggestion, and we had a wonderful talk from you. Thank you very much, all of you.
It's been absolutely delightful. I mean, it's just amazing to hear all the things about Professor Dhawan. What a inspiration he was, multifaceted personality, and what some people may not know, he also helped our aerospace engineering department, got established. There is a little story that in 1960-61 timeframe, there was the person who was handling the maintenance of Air Force, Harjinder Singh. He had predicted that very soon we are going to have a war with China, and we will not be using Air Force because we will not have enough maintenance engineers. And he wanted, somebody and he was PEC alum, so he came to PEC and said, "Can you start aerospace engineering, because very soon we are going to have a war." And we actually started in 1962. And the way we started was the first 2 years used to be common. And we said, okay, the people directly get into third year because the existing electrical, mechanical, civil engineering people will be put into aerospace so that we can very quickly produce aerospace engineers. And now since this happened within a matter of weeks and months, we didn't have any faculty and so on. And we approached Professor Dhawan, can they spend a semester at ISC Bangalore, and he really helped us out. So that's really something that we will always remain grateful for that support. Also, and Professor Grover talked about Mridang Sur. His sister is actually in the audience right now, and we have already contacted her to connect to Professor Sur. And I personally heard Professor Sur, and great speaker. Would definitely love to have him here. Also, I think I will request Dr. Dhawan and Divya, if they can work together to get a gallery of all these photographs and the degree certificate that you showed us. Can we have a scanned copy of all of those?
Sure.
And we can have it on our website, a gallery for Professor Satish Dhawan. That would be really wonderful. So thank you very much for agreeing to give this talk. It's been absolutely delightful. And we will remain indebted to you for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much again. And thank you to Divya. Most efficiently organized webinar I have ever participated in. Flawless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you.
So thank you, Pamela ji.
Great pleasure. Yeah, it was a most enjoyable Sunday evening for me.
I thought
Thank you,
of you,
Pamela.
suggested to Divya, and Divya promptly accepted it and contacted you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. I'll get in touch with you, Jyotsna.
Sure.
Yeah.
Certainly.
To hear about cell biology. We want you
Sure.
to give a talk on cell.
I would love to anytime.
Okay.